Looks like we're actually live now, so we're a little bit
Uh-oh.
early. Are you ready?
I was looking down at the beginning. This changes everything. Now, the
Forget it.
commenters, oh
It's
my
over.
God.
It's
He's
over.
looking at his notes. Oh, Lord.
Oh, God. Well, gosh, talk about notes. I've got 3 pages sitting here. Anyway, everybody, welcome to Don't Let It Go. My name is Amy Peikoff, and I am very privileged to have here with me today someone who should require no introduction, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce him anyway. And this is Dave Rubin. He launched the political talk show, The Rubin Report, back in 2015. And he did this as a meeting ground for free thinkers who realize that partisan politics is a dead end. He hosts people he both agrees and disagrees with, including those who have been dismissed, deplatformed, and despised, taking on the most controversial issues of the day. And as a result, he's become a voice of reason in a time of madness. And now he gets to add to that because of this book that I have right here by my side, New York Times bestseller as well. So welcome, Dave. How are
A-
you?
Amy, it's good to be with you. We've been trying to do some version of this one way or another for quite some time, so I'm glad it finally worked out. And it's a shame that it's not in person, but we deal with what we got, I guess,
Yes, yes.
these
The only
days.
people you can be with there in person is your husband, and that was really cute that you guys got to do that. So,
Can I drop some insider info? I don't want to get in any trouble with the authorities, but
mm.
as you may note, I have a pretty sharp haircut.
Oh,
I'm not
please don't
saying
rub it
any,
in.
I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying maybe somebody came to my house in a highly illegal operation. I'm not saying any, I'm just saying I'm feeling pretty good about the sides today. And yesterday they were like this. So I'm just saying, but I'm not saying, you know what I'm
I
saying?
was I was trying to offend you. You've been, kind of stampeded on Twitter lately with good reason because you are a bestseller. But I was trying to offend you by showing you that I was reading your book with lockdown hair. And as a matter of fact, I have lockdown hair today, but I've kind of sprayed it into some sort of order. Not that I'd actually cut it anyway. I'm trying to grow it back out. But hey, let's dive in because this is crazy. I've got 3 pages of questions. And for people who are joining me here on YouTube, I am going to try to get through some of the questions first, at least before we go in. And we may leave just the pure political questions out because I think that would be within the spirit of your book.
I always say to my guests before we start the interview, you know the rules, there are no rules, and that's how we'll go about this one.
Beautiful, beautiful. First of all, I just want to thank you for writing the book because even though I'm not someone who needs to come out in the 2 types of ways that you discuss in the book, not precisely that anyway, I have for a few years now been working on carving my own path as what I call an unaffiliated objectivist. And I have found the book personally helpful in thinking about how to pursue that going forward. So thanks for that.
Oh, great. I'm glad to hear it.
And I want to proceed a bit out of order. And so my warm-up question is going to be about chapter 8, which is about how to spot fake news. And in the chapter, you have great stories about the Covington scandal from January 2019, the Jussie Smollett hate crime hoax, the Russian collusion, and of course that terrible New York Times story about Kane. That one really takes the cake, of course, because he ended up being a liberal. That was crazy. But
No, wait, let's just not gloss over it for 2 seconds because the whole purpose of this Sunday front page article in the New York Times was that YouTube is radicalizing people to the alt-right and the far right. That's the premise, that's the title of the article. And then if you read the article, at the end, the guy that they track, this young kid, he ends up as a lefty, as a progressive because of YouTube. So literally, and that is a type of fake news when the headline is completely different than the story itself. And then I go into some of the details about the author and sort of the dishonest tactics and the rest of
oh,
it. But that one,
definitely.
that one to me, for my dad, I mention it in the book, my dad goes to the same, he is subscribed to the New York Times since before I was born. So like 45 years. My dad is what I would describe as a good old school liberal. He goes to the same bagel place every Sunday. He walks in that Sunday and his friend comes up to him and says, I didn't know your son David was a member of the alt-right. And my dad's like, what? And this is the stupidity that mainstream media has left us with.
No, definitely. And I like that in the chapter you give various tips about how to try to sniff out the fake news and protect yourself from it and try to seek out credible news sources. And given that we're in this coronavirus era, and I have been, from my gut, getting the sense, especially lately, that the media seems to be trying to make us more fearful. And especially as we're looking at reopening and going on with our lives and saying, okay, you know, this is not Ebola anyway, let's get on with it. They seem to be trying to scare us in advance of this. That's the sense that I'm getting. What has your sense been about the media in this era?
Yeah, well, look, on the broad sense, I don't trust the mainstream media anymore. That's the whole purpose of the chapter. They have failed us repeatedly, over and over and over again. You know, even the examples that you just talked about, Covington and Smollett and that Times article, it's like I had about 50 other big things that we could have talked about. I mean, I go basically gloss over Russian collusion. I gloss over Ukraine. These were massive things that literally every night at 8 p.m. on MSNBC, Rachel Maddow went on and on and on and on about. Does she, you know, get punished, or does anyone bring her into an office and say, no, of course, because in the media you can lie and lie and lie, but as long as you're lying in their direction, you're good to go. As for coronavirus, look, we've been doing this now, this lockdown thing, for about 2 months. We're veering into 2 months now. We have not rioted. We haven't been killing each other. We've been social distancing. As Americans, we have virtually, with almost no exceptions, done exactly what they have asked of us. 30 million people lost their job in the process, yet we didn't see people breaking into houses to steal food. All of these things, right? So we have done it. Now, has the government perfectly communicated everything to us? Of course not. You can partly blame Trump, you can partly blame the governors, but also there's no such thing as perfect communication. There's no such thing as a perfect system to do all of these things, and hindsight is 2020 and the rest of it. What I would say now, it's interesting you said the word conspiracy theory, but it's like we are veering towards a place where it's like, what are these governors really trying to do? When Whitmer in Michigan says that you can't plant seeds and you can't landscape your own property, which is what she said, you know, a couple of weeks ago. And just today I saw a video just an hour ago. She's now extended till May 28th, but doesn't.
Oh
really
my gosh,
say,
that's crazy.
but doesn't really say why. Or when our governor here in California, Gavin Newsom, he was the former mayor of San Francisco and wrecked San Francisco. We don't have to go into that. Everyone knows what's happened to San Francisco. And then our progressive mayor here in Eric Garcetti, who's telling people that we should snitch on our neighbors. And then they closed the beaches just 5 days ago. And it's like, you know, just because you guys say something, I think this is part of a condition of leftism, is that leftists sort of think that when they say something, just because someone in power says it, that makes it true in and of itself. And that's just not true. What would have been a mature policy would have been, hey guys, we're still concerned about Corona. We flattened the curve. Everyone's doing their thing. But you know what? Right now, you know this, it's 85 and sunny in SoCal. This is perfect SoCal. This is like why you live here, why you pay the high taxes and the whole thing. What they could have said to us was, hey, we can't let everybody go to the beach because we're not exactly sure what's going to happen. So we're going to do half capacity. If you park your car, you have to have an open space to the car next to you. We're going to cordon off areas on the beach with tape, and only groups of 4 or less can be there, and you have to be distanced. And if you use a public restroom, you have to put on gloves. And then had some level of enforcement. I think everybody would have been like, okay, let's either go to the beach or not go to the beach. It sounds like a hassle. But instead, that would take maturity. That would take honesty. And that's not what they're in the business of. Instead, they just say, no beaches, accept it, we said it. And I think that's the thing. No seeds, just accept it. No landscaping, just accept it. That's the thing that we cannot accept and we should not accept.
No, definitely. And I'm, wondering, can I just even go to the beach this weekend? After I do this interview with you, I'd like that as a reward. And no, I don't get to do that.
Can we meet you want to meet at the beach and see what happens? I mean, I'm tempted. I'm really tempted.
I have a favorite beach, and something I apparently would want to talk to you about is that I'm planning on leaving California fairly soon. And so, yes, I would like to go to the beach before I go a few times. I'm a native.
Do you know where you're going? Is that public knowledge yet?
I'm going to Texas.
Listen, you've probably seen me be tweeting about it. I'm thinking about it I am thinking about it for the first time. I can't believe it. If you would have ever told me that I would be thinking about living in Texas. I mean,
No.
I'm also thinking about Florida. I've always enjoyed Florida. My folks have a little condo in Florida. But I'm honestly thinking about Texas right now. I can't believe it. But this is an interesting point for objectivists who are so into sort of a philosophical consistency, which is why I enjoy doing objectivist events so much. It's like at what point can you live in a place that is so counter to your beliefs. And especially for me, as somebody that openly talks about this stuff, it's like,
Yes.
man, how long? It's not about, look, the money part sucks because of the taxes, but that's not
Sure.
really the issue for me. The issue is, how long can I live in a place that is so incongruent with the ideas that I espouse? I'm not sure how much longer I can. I truly, I love my life here. I love our house. I love what we've built, but I honestly don't know.
Yeah, no, and for me, it's partially about the money because I'm trying to do this startup of, hopefully getting into a position that's something like yours at a certain point. And in order to do that more cheaply, Texas makes more sense. But I did live there for a year in Austin. And so I know that the area is a very nice area. The town is cool and everything. I don't want to go to Houston. I lived in Houston as a kid. So I'm thinking more Austin area.
Little humid
But
over there, little humid in Houston.
yeah, no, that was not good at all. But I've been really impressed with the way that Abbott has handled this coronavirus crisis so far, at least. I'm crossing fingers for them because they're in the reopening now. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we just booked
But
him. I think I'm interviewing him on Monday or Tuesday.
okay, I have been super impressed. And so that, compared to Newsom, oh my gosh, Newsom, he's pushing his progressive agenda plus just keeping everything locked down way longer than it needs to be. And that's ridiculous. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Have you had a sense at all of this other kind of potential, issue where we need to sort through truth versus not in the news? And that's the Ahmaud Arbery shooting. Have you had a sense of that at all? Or are you so busy with your book?
So honestly, I truly can't comment on that thing
Okay.
specifically. I've been
Yeah.
doing like 12-hour days with
I'm
no time
sure.
in between. So you'll see, I haven't even tweeted about it. I want to know more. I'm happy to hear you if you want to explain it a bit more, but I can talk broadly about the fake news sort of narrative around all of these stories kind of thing, but I truly can't comment on it specifically.
Yeah,
I haven't had a moment.
why don't we zoom to a different one? And this is the interesting thing is that right now, YouTube, which has not failed me before, is somehow not streaming this. I'm recording this, so we're fine. But there has been a failure, a glitch in YouTube.
You don't say.
Yeah,
you don't say.
you've had your share of glitches with YouTube, right? So
We
what
have
I'm
had
going to
our
do,
share.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this. Just the stream. I'm just going to stop the stream. I'm going to keep recording. We get a little bit of sausage for everybody later. And I've got the Zoom feature that's just going to put me direct live on YouTube. So at least I can have those poor people who are waiting to see us live can come on and do that. But I've got the whole thing recording for later. That's ridiculous. It's really ridiculous.
I mean, look,
it worked fine. I had John Allison last week. It worked exactly perfectly.
Look, this is again, it's like we're all conspiracy theorists these days. It's like, do they want to shut down certain conversations? Is it possible that your upload speeds are screwy right now because of Corona and everybody's online? Yeah, anything's possible.
Zoom was telling me I was live. Zoom
Yeah.
was telling me I was fine. So here we go. And it looks like it's supposed to be doing it. It could be that Zoom made another tweak because Zoom has been tweaking because they've been under such high demand. So they might have updated, but it looks like it's going. Let's see where it's going. Let's see if the people are there. Well, we are live, and then I can at least drop this over to the poor people who are waiting and then continue with our...
Yeah, we are at least live humans. I can confirm that much.
Yeah, we are live humans. And let me share this. Copy, and I'll go over here and get the poor people going. Okay, there we go. Okay, we are set. So yeah, let's skip that issue and then let's go on to the second question that I had. You've got chapter 7, and 7 is a paean, an ode to United States, which, for me, of course, I agree with you that United States is one of the greatest, if not the greatest country in history. There are other places, very few around the globe, that could even hope to compare to it. Has your view of our country changed during the coronavirus era? A little while ago, you were saying that you were pretty happy with our response as Americans. What about kind of politically? You think Texas could provide some hope? Or do you think it's the last bastion of rationality in this era? Or are there other places that you would consider as kind of living up to your standards?
Yeah, what a world. It's like, wow, Texas could be the last bastion of rationality. How about that, huh? But that does tell you something.
Yeah.
It does tell you something. Look, it's not to say that everything we've done is perfect, but as I said before, the numbers are way less than we anticipated. It's also not to say that if we start opening up, so Texas is opening up now. Now, look, is it possible that they will have some bump and some spike in cases because people will be out and about. Of course it's possible, but is that fear the reason not to open up? And I would say the answer is no. You have to take some risk. Excuse me. You have to take some chance. I mean, life, that's what life is, right? I mean, the old phrase, those who would trade in security for liberty deserve neither. I mean, that is the idea. So when these politicians come out there, and there's a lot of them on the left saying, well, we can't open up until there won't be one case or until we have an antidote. We don't have an antidote to the common cold. I mean, they're literally just making up nonsense to keep us afraid. So I would say, relative to America, there is something beautiful happening here. We are actually operating on the principles with which we were founded. Remember that Constitution thing and the Federalist Papers and all that stuff? Well, what is Governor Abbott doing? He's saying, here's my situation here. We're looking at the numbers. We want to get people back to work. There's that crazy situation of the salon owner in Dallas. That woman is a true American hero. And he's going to take some risk. And we will see how it works. That is a much more better, honest, and I would say American way of going about blazing a path forward rather than keeping us in our house all the time. This is not tenable much longer. And not only that, you will love this. The people that I'm talking to in LA when I do Zooms or FaceTimes or whatever, like the Cali people, a lot of my even lefty friends are going, enough is enough. Like, this ain't right. This ain't right. We're not seeing overrun hospitals. We're not seeing sick young people. Everything is less than what they said. So at what point do they have to level with us? And then, when you go the conspiracy route, it's like, is it possible that a certain amount of Democratic governors and politicians want an absolute crash of the economy because that will take out Orange Man bad? And I'm not saying that's exactly what's happening, but to pretend that's not potentially a piece of this, I think is just silly.
No, and I mean, I don't like Trump, but there is no way that I would, want him to, quote, fail on this issue, because this is all of our livelihoods. And
you may not like the pilot of the plane, but you usually want him to finish the mission.
Yes, please, So no, I really love, what Abbott is doing. He sort of had everybody locked down when things were still looking uncertain. And then once you realize this is not great, there are people who are going to lose their lives, but it's not the sort of thing that justifies perpetual lockdowns. You just have to open up. And so he is. I wish him the best. I've discussed with John Allison, for example, the issue of liability, legal liability for businesses in our country, and how messed up that is. And that could get to, people are suing a restaurant because they got coronavirus or something. That would be terrible. But I really hope that as Americans, we can, kind of embrace that spirit and realize that life cannot be risk-free.
But think about what you're saying there. What you're saying is there are going to be issues. That's an honest assessment of using your brain and logic and reason. There are going to be issues that pop up, insurance issues. Can businesses, can they sustain at 50%? If we tell all restaurants, now you can open up at 50%. And then they just realize they actually can't even function that way. This is where, of course, I know you believe this, that human ingenuity and competition will ultimately settle this all out. It's the only way. It's not the government edict that's going to do it. But why won't they have those honest conversations with us? Where is Eric Garcetti saying, where I live here, it's like I live off the main boulevard here, and it's like you drive down it and I know that those dozens and dozens of mom and pop stores are not coming back. They can't come back. Why is it right now that Target can be open? Now that's fine with me that Target's open, but why is it that a mom and pop shop that sells the same stuff, why were they told they can't be open? Why can't they set whatever their rules are? And that lovely woman, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name. Was it the woman in Dallas? She said, she did a video saying, I'm going to do all the things you're asking.
Yes. We're
going to have masks. Here's the video of how we're going to deal with taking care of everybody and making sure that there's gloves and all of those things and proper sanitation, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
And that still wasn't enough. And then that smug, awful judge, for him to say you have to apologize. And her answer, man, I will not apologize for putting food on my kid's table. She is awesome.
No, it's beautiful. And I've got a couple friends, they have an art gallery up in Napa, the Cordaires. And they recently opened just this week in defiance of all of these orders. And they said, look, it's an art gallery. Nobody's allowed to touch anything. We will make sure, that people can come in and have proper social distancing and masks and everything else. And, how is it that it's safe to go to grocery stores where everybody's hands are on everything and people can't come here and just look at some art? Seems a little ridiculous, right?
What happened? What did the Napa authorities do?
So the last I heard, I don't know, there was also a restaurant that followed suit with them, which was really nice, opened as well. Last I heard, they were threatened with an injunction, but I don't think it's actually come through yet. And I doubt that Newsom would stand up for them the way that Abbott stood up for our wonderful woman in Dallas. So
no, of course he couldn't, and that goes to why you're moving to Texas. At some point, that's what I think is interesting right now. I think a lot of people are thinking this, that we all have our own political philosophies or our belief system or whatever it is, but it does feel like, and maybe this is the beauty of going through something like this, it does feel like the rubber is meeting the road right now, doesn't it? Like, these aren't the things that we all talk about all the time. They're not really ideas anymore. Now they're like directly involved in our lives.
Yes.
And I think there is so much change coming to America and to the world about how we live, how we work, whether we commute, do we want to work from home? Are you married to someone that you want to be trapped in a house with?
Right.
Do you want to be so reliant on all of these big systems? And do you want to live in a giant building where you can maybe do everything to take care of yourself, but you can't control everybody else? Do you want to start growing some food? I'm basically a Los Angeles farmer now. We put planters on the side of our house. I grew broccoli that we ate last night. We've got peppers, We've got cucumbers, we've got squash, we've got a couple little orange trees going. And it's like, I'm realizing, well, first of all, I actually really enjoy it, and it's nice to do something without the phone. But like, there's something nice about having something that you can grow, you can take care of. And if the poop hits the fan, you're going to be all right.
That's harder to do here than in Texas, probably, some ways. Yeah.
Well, LA, it's not like I have a lot of land here. I mean, I just have my little narrow pathway on each side of my house, and I have little thin planters, but I'm doing what I can.
That's beautiful. That's really amazing. That's really amazing. So yeah, maybe we're all going to meet up in Texas at a certain point. It's pretty crazy that a lot of people are thinking along these lines. So let's see, chapter 6, you talk about never surrendering to the mob. And, I was wondering along those lines, because you've really been through it. And I wanted to say, congratulations even more, because now that I see what you've been through to get where you are, it's really an inspiring story. But now, since you've published the book, have you gotten a new wave of all of this junk that you got at that time?
Well, it's funny, because I titled the book, Don't Burn This Book, because what I lay out in this book is some common sense stuff. And actually, I know that you and I have a couple of different political positions, and that's fine. And I'm more than happy to talk about them. But basically what I lay out here, I believe, is pretty common sense stuff. I think it's totally in line with the way the founders planned this country and all of the great ideas that have made us all flourish. But the thing is, when you live in a time of uncommon sense, well, then common sense seems dangerous. So I didn't expect this to be like the Reichstag fire in 1941 Germany, that people were going to be throwing books into the bonfire. But there is a sort of digital or modern book burning. I've got these Reddit trolls and the underbelly of the internet that coordinate to send all the attackers to the Amazon page to write all these bad reviews. And none of them are verified purchases, and none of them have read the book, and they all just attack me personally, and blah, 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 blah. The book is selling great. We crushed it on the New York Times list. It's all great. It's all great. Not to say that stuff isn't annoying, but in effect, what they're doing is a digital book burning. When you throw a book into the fire, why were the Nazis doing that? They didn't want these ideas heard. So when you bum rush a site and attack its reviews, whether it's a book or it's just a product, or whether doesn't matter, it could be a hand sanitizer or anything else. If you lie or try to game the system, you're trying to depress sales. You're trying to make sure that those ideas don't get out there. So that is a modern book burning. So these trolls and whoever is coordinating all this nonsense, it's like, thanks guys, because you're actually proving the point of the book. If you don't like the book, don't read the book. No. But if you feel a need to try to harm other people's ability to read the book, well, then congratulations, you're a modern book burner.
No, definitely. And a few years ago, I made the connection with an article I read about they're not teaching critical thinking in universities as well as they used to. And I think it's this lack of the people feeling that they can actually answer the arguments that you have in your book that makes them feel like their only recourse is to go out there and in effect do the modern book burning. Or, you know, if you were to speak on a college campus, who knows what sort of protests you'd be encountering, like the Ben Shapiro stuff a few years ago, right?
Oh, I've been through many versions of it. For anyone that wants to see really the craziest one that I ever been through, which is from about 2.5 years ago, just search Dave Rubin, University of New Hampshire, and you'll see some really zany stuff, including a woman in the back who I didn't find out till after was a gender studies professor screaming that I'm a Nazi and a bigot and everything else. It turned out she was trans, and all I kept saying was, I want you to live with dignity and equality, and I hope you
Sure.
find someone you love, and all of the usual stuff. And she's still
Mhm.
screaming. I mean, and did she get any retribution from the university for shouting down an invited speaker? Of course not. But I will say one other thing on the sort of mob side of this. You know, it's interesting. I lay out principles that if you're a pure Democrat or a pure Republican or lefty, righty, whatever that is, there's things in this book that will piss off everybody. As a matter
Sure.
of fact, you know, I take a pro-choice argument in this. That is the biggest one for the people on the right. That is the one more than gay marriage, more than anything
Yes.
else. That is their third rail one. You don't touch it, right? Now, isn't it interesting that I'm only getting love from people on the right, and they're all saying, Dave, I disagree with you on that, but the book's pretty good. There are no trolls on the right attacking me for taking a pro-choice position. But that gets to your point about the critical thinking thing. As
Mhm.
critical thinking was removed from college education, leftists have basically come to believe sort of what I said about our governors before, that just because they feel it or because they think it, that thus it is true and moral. And
Yes.
that is, so then they send it, look, I'm gay married, I'm pro-choice, I'm against the death penalty. We can go through the lefty stuff. I'm for legalizing
Right.
weed, blah, blah, blah. You would think that some of them would be like, oh, well, you know, there's some stuff in here. It's okay. We don't have to mob the Amazon account or whatever. But they don't see it that way, because if you don't buy everything that they're selling, the moment they're selling it, you're out. Where on the right, it's like, wow, he's pro-choice. Maybe, you know, I don't agree with him on that, but it's a book. Maybe I won't buy it. That's okay.
Sure.
Maybe I
Exactly.
will.
No, exactly. You know, I did my law school education first year at Pepperdine and then transferred over to UCLA. And at Pepperdine, they're religious
Of course.
conservative
Yeah.
more traditionally. And they were much more respectful. I've always been out of the closet objectivist. They were much more respectful of me there than the leftist professors over at UCLA. And so I
Huh.
did have that experience myself in that
You know, something
time
special
period.
must be happening at Pepperdine, because I'm sure you know Michael Shermer, and Michael Shermer he's a skeptic and an atheist, and he went to Pepperdine also. And
Okay.
he told me a very similar thing. He told me that he was reading, he actually mentioned Ayn Rand in our last interview that we did a week or two ago. He
Mm,
said everyone was reading The Fountainhead back then and all of these things. And it was like, we were at a Christian school, and yet here is this objectivist thinker who obviously takes a non-religious approach to things, but people were happy to debate these ideas and it wasn't a problem. And I actually do think that goes
yeah.
to a little bit of the undergirding of principles that I think religious people have been able to hold up a little bit better than the pure secular leftists, unfortunately. And I really mean that when I say unfortunately.
Yeah, no, and I think that's exactly right. And why is it the case that even though I'm an objectivist, I get to talk with, you know, people like, well, I don't know how I classify you, but Ben Shapiro, for example, I've had a friendly relationship with him over the years, and he's, of course, religious conservative. So there's a lot to this,
Yeah. Well,
definitely.
it's freedom. That's the answer. That's the answer. You're an objectivist. You want the government out of your life. Ben's a conservative. He wants the government out of his life.
Yes.
Nothing that Ben believes is trying to come for your secular world, and nothing that you believe is trying to come for his religious world. That's it.
No, exactly. Not at all. Not at all. So here we go. Next on my list of questions. Ready?
Let's
Find a
go.
mentor you talk about in chapter 9. Can I just, oh, first of all, you say dress better. And I did try to go get the nose ring put back in, but the piercing salon is closed because of Newsom. It's his fault, okay?
Yes.
Um, but how is Jordan Peterson? Is he doing okay? Do you know?
So I don't want to say anything that is not public, but I can tell you that I saw him a few months ago. He's getting better. His next book is coming out. As a matter of fact, he emailed me congratulations on the New York Times thing. So he's getting there. It's going to take some time.
Okay.
It's not what his book is about, by the way, but he's going to explain a little bit of what he's been through. But
Okay.
I assure you, if anyone can beat something brutal, as he would put it, he's the guy.
No, I would imagine, and I'm wishing him the best. So there in that chapter, you also talk about the issue of religious stories, that you had come to learn the value of religious stories. And do you consider yourself agnostic?
You know, I go into this a little bit in the book. I mean, I would say at this point, I mean, truly, I consider myself a believer in that I see no way around it, actually. I have tried. I have tried in many ways.
Well, so here's the question, right? Because you talk about, like, we have, in fact, this drive towards authoritarianism, and there's evil, human evil, and that somehow human beings alone cannot overcome this evil, this push towards authoritarianism. And I just wonder, how could you think really that human evil is more powerful than human good? Because they both come from human beings, right? Human beings, evil and good, I think, would have the same amount of strength and stamina and everything else. And plus the good has the truth on its side.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a bunch there, and I go into this for about 5 or 6 pages in the book. So first off, I want to be totally clear on one thing.
Yeah.
At a micro level, at an individual level, you can be a non-believer and be a deeply moral, good person. Look, you know how many objectivist conferences I go to.
Oh, I'm not taking it as an attack. I'm just trying to push a little.
No, but I'm more than happy to have this conversation, obviously, Amy.
Sure.
But I'm using the objectivist conferences as an example, because what I find when I go to objectivist conferences, who obviously most of them are believers in objectivism, which is I don't want to. Would you characterize it as anti-religion? Is that a fair? I don't want to say.
I would say non-religious,
non-religious.
Atheist in the actual sense, like non-theist, right?
Okay, so fair enough. So what I find, though, is every single, without exception, objectivist conference I've ever gone to, I find the people thoughtful, decent, good, open-minded. I've been to conferences where, speakers have been invited. Yaron Brook and Tal Safani, who's now the head of ARI, have asked me many times, can you please bring us speakers who disagree with everything we say? So objectivists, I think, have done a really nice job of living up to their principles. So, so I want to just make it clear that when I say that at the micro level, of course, Sam Harris and Michael Shermer and Peter Boghossian, people that I think are wonderful human beings and warm and good and honest and all those things. At the micro level, of course, you can be good and moral and all of those things. The position that I've taken, and I just see no way around it, is that a society needs to believe in something outside of itself. Otherwise, it cannot organize. And I think we're seeing that right now. The destructive force that the left has become, this endless government force, this endless, I feel it, so it must be true force. The reason it's wreaking so much havoc, and suddenly if you say that there are different biological differences between men and women, a group of people is going to come destroy you, is that secularism in and of itself, I don't think it's enough to stand. Now, that doesn't mean you have to believe in some God that is watching and judging you and sending you to hell and all of those things. I think there has to be. I would say this, I'm a functional believer. Some people need a belief because of a metaphysical reason or a deep, deep spiritual reason.
Right.
That's not the position I'm taking, really. But I do believe there has to be some empirical truths outside of us to organize a society, which, by the way, our founders, what did they talk about? God-given rights that we were going to protect with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And then what did they do that was even more brilliant? Then they also said, hey, by the way, guys, we're going to separate the church and state. So even though we're saying that these are God-given rights, meaning you're born free, we're also not going to force you to believe that. So our founders did some truly exquisite, glorious things with our founding document. So I would say in that sense, they were believers, but I don't know that they all believed in exactly the same God, or that, some of them were a-religious, some of them were more religious. Or deists, really, right, exactly. But they felt that the organizing principle of a flourishing society had to come from something besides man. So I hear your argument about good and evil, and by the way, I've discussed this with many, many great thinkers on my show, and that's why I've been able to churn through all these ideas so much and so often. I just sort of see no way around it. And I'll just say one other thing, which is that is not to say that I think anything you believe is wrong. You know what I
Right.
mean?
No, no,
Like
sure,
I
sure.
really mean that.
Well, and to get a deep dive into this, we have to go through the whole argument that Rand has in that essay, The Objectivist Ethics. But I don't know if you've ever read, there's one essay called The Objectivist Ethics, where she in essence describes the source of rights, the whole foundation for an ethics and a rights that is objective, that doesn't give rise to a need for anything outside of all that exists that we can perceive. It is outside of any particular society in the sense that it's rooted in human nature and in the nature of the interaction between human beings and the universe as such. How do we learn about the world and all of those things, that we need reason, we must be free in order to produce the values to sustain our lives. It's objective in that sense, and so it's outside of any particular human being and outside of any particular society, but it does require the grasp of human beings. And yeah, maybe we need to shore up our critical thinking skills in order to get to a place where we can convince people not to listen to the unreason in the culture today.
So I don't know that I've read that essay particularly, but I do know the basis of the thoughts because obviously I've
You've
read
had a lot
plenty
of
of Ayn Rand,
discussions.
and I've been to many objectivist conferences. What I would say though is, in a way, what you said at the end, I would say actually makes my argument, because what you said at the end was maybe we need to shore up our reasoning and our critical thinking and the rest of it.
Well, okay, but I don't mean the objectivist literature per se.
No.
But I just mean in the culture at large.
And that's why what I'm saying is I actually don't think a culture can fully rely on the human mind and Enlightenment values.
Okay.
I just simply don't think it can work. I think that the winds of tyranny, the winds of man. I mean, look, why has liberalism, the liberalism that I know you would basically believe in, that I believe in, why has it been destroyed? There are no liberals left.
Because there wasn't consistency in our founding would be Rand's answer, right? So that Kant has had his influence before Rand ever came about, and that sort of destructive element through progressivism, right? Progressivism started in the late 19th century and just wrought all sorts of destruction. And all of us, I mean, I went to public schools. We are a product of progressive education. We've had to struggle against a lot of that. And, some people aren't as lucky as others in terms of how battered they get through that form of education. It's sort of stamped rationality out of people.
Right. So with that in mind, I think that's exactly why we've seen liberalism fail. Progressivism saw the soft underbelly of liberalism, the open-mindedness of liberals, the Enlightenment values of liberals, the tolerance of liberals, and they saw it as a weakness. So they came in and basically decimated liberals. And that's why the group that's standing strongest right now, I think politically, are the conservatives. Now, that doesn't mean the conservatives are right about everything. And of course, I would love to see more of a strong libertarian bend, let's say, in conservatism, which I do see. I mean, look, whatever you think about Trump, it's like Rand Paul is one of his best allies. I'm going to guess that Rand Paul is probably your favorite member of the Senate, right? Like he's the most, no? I mean, he's the most libertarian. He's certainly imperfect libertarian, but he's the most libertarian senator we've got.
I guess maybe senator, yeah.
Yeah. So they right. No, there are a couple others, Justin Amash in the House and whatever.
In the House, right? Yeah.
But senator, I mean, the most limited government, get out of your way guy is Trump's ally. So I do see something rich on the right that has just not happened on the left, and I do think that has something to do with conservatives believe in something outside of themselves. So as we've watched social justice and progressivism just extend its horrific tentacles across society, the conservative institutions are still standing. But what isn't standing? The liberal New York Times, which is now just a progressive rag. Right. Harvard is crumbling under it. All of the liberal institutions, they can't, because they don't believe in anything outside themselves. So I would love it. I think in many ways what this really comes down to is that I think you're probably a little more of an idealist, and maybe I'm a little more of a pragmatist. Something like that. And
it definitely could be that, because I mean, what you're saying in effect is not surprising, because what have been the traditional sort of options that people have swing back and forth throughout history. So you have subjectivism, and then you'll go over to a mysticism, religion, because it's going to provide some sort of supposedly objective or absolute truth outside of human beings. But, Rand's only from 20th century, and she comes in and says, look here, I've got a foundation for something that is outside of any individual human being. It is an alternative to subjectivism and the whim worship of the left right now, but not enough people have embraced it yet. There's just, and it's going to take some time. You don't have to have everybody embrace it, certainly not, but as a foundation, as an enduring foundation that isn't going to give into either the leftist totalitarianism or the, sort of religious theist totalitarianism either. And we've got some of those regimes in the Middle East right now. We don't want to go to that place either.
No, listen, absolutely. And there's so much richness here. We could do this for 5
hours. No, we definitely could. And I've got other places that we want to go with this.
Yeah. But the important thing is that this all just goes to show why I enjoy conversations with objectivists. It's like you guys consistently apply logic and reason across the board. And even as you're disagreeing with the conclusion I've come to, it's very obvious that you could see why I think it, and I can see why you think your conclusion, and that's what it's all about, really.
No, and one of the things that I go out and I grab URLs, as I get inspired, and one of them is Save Civil Discourse, which is one of the things that you've worked towards, because I think that civil discourse has just taken a nosedive, and it's one of the things that is going to, if it can be saved, save our country. So Chapter 10, you talk about all of the great tips for moving on with your life and not being mired in politics. And of course, these days you have to have survival tactics of really setting that phone aside after a certain hour each night and don't grab it too early in the morning, etc. You talk about also there, if you're on social media, that you should feel free to unfollow or mute people who make your experience really unpleasant, all these trolls and stuff. And I was wondering how you balance that with not living in an echo chamber, which is something else that you talk about earlier in the book in chapter 8. You say, don't live in the echo chamber because otherwise you might be susceptible to fake news. How do you strike that balance?
So it's a great question, because it's like very much what we're all trying to deal with all the time if you're a connected person right now. So I would say, when I say you should mute people or unfollow people, well, first off, you should think about why you're doing it. So in terms of just the easy version of this is, if they're just trolls, if they're just anonymous accounts, just hating you all day long, or attacking you all day long, or lying about you all day long, or all those things, block them, mute them, that's it. That we don't have to think about that one too much. If it's just this endless plethora of hate. If people are challenging you respectfully, you shouldn't mute them or block them.
Right.
Every now and again, the only time I've really broken that rule is sometimes, a random person will tweet at me 20, 50 times in a row. And I'm like, I just can't, I get what you're saying. But I also have a life. So I just will have to mute them. And I always sort of feel bad when I do it, but it's like, otherwise it makes the experience of being on these things sort of impossible. What I would say is, in terms of unfollowing, now this is a little different, because you follow people because hopefully there's something that they're doing that you find interesting, and maybe you love what they're doing. Maybe you actually disagree with them, and let's not all think that this is just about politics. You follow musicians, you follow artists, you follow basketball players, all sorts of stuff. When I say that, one of the things that I mean really is, like, I've had to unfollow celebrities or comedians, let's say, that I've really liked their work, but they get unmasked as like these far left whatever who are calling everybody racist all day. And then it sort of ruins my experience of art. And that's a very sort of objectivist view on this, right? Because I do believe that art is important. So, like, I'll give you one example, actually. I hate bringing up a specific person, but I think this is the right one. So Judd Apatow, who's the Hollywood director who did 40-Year-Old Virgin and a million other things. I actually grew up in the same town as him. We went to the same high school. He's a few years old. He's a few years older than me, but we know we've had some of the same teachers. We've spoke once or twice. He's a total lefty, which in and of itself is fine. But, he's calling half the country racist all day, which, by the way, I thought he wants half the country to go see his movies, just attacking people all day long, fighting. He's endlessly miserable on there. I don't mean this as an attack on him as a person or his character. We all sometimes are our worst selves on Twitter. But finally, what I realized was, I was sitting here one day, this is about 3 or 4 months ago, And it was Sunday, and I'm just flipping the channels, and the 40-Year-Old Virgin came on.
Hmm.
And it's a good movie. It's a good movie. But my initial feeling was, can I curse? I can curse. It's YouTube. You're
Oh, of
okay with the
course
curse?
you can.
I
Yeah.
was like, fucking Apatow. That's really what popped into my head. And I think because of that, I was like, you know what? I just have to unfollow this guy. Like,
Yeah.
I just have to unfollow him. And you know what's funny even than that is about 2 months before that, I had seen him at a restaurant here in LA, and he was with his wife, and they were sitting they were waiting for a table, and I was waiting for a table. And I wanted to go up to him and just say, hey, Judd, I'm not sure if you know who I am, Dave Rubin, but we went to the same high school. You grew up literally 2 blocks away from me. I know we've got some differences, blah, blah, blah. But I also didn't want to make everything about this thing all the time. And that really is the theme about chapter 10 is be able to disconnect. So my point is don't just unfollow people because they think something differently, but if they're acting respectfully and honorably, and by the way, that is getting harder and harder to do with a lot of leftists, unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully you don't totally siphon yourself off, but it's on you. That really is the point.
Yeah, I mean, whether you can have some sort of intelligent exchange of ideas with people or not would be one of the criteria for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I like that line, and I think I'm mostly consistent with it as you were talking. I'm thinking, have I been? And mostly I have, but yeah, occasionally it's been the person who won't leave you alone with notifications as well will sometimes push it over the edge. So another one that comes up from that chapter, you talk about helping people think for themselves, and of course, this is part of the subtitle of your book, Thinking for Yourself. And you think that by thinking for themselves, they're going to probably join the classical liberal tradition in some sense by
Mm-hmm.
the end of the book. So I'm going to push you a little because you can interpret thinking for yourself in a couple ways. So one of the ways is the way that we've really been talking about quite a bit, which is actually doing your own thinking and not being taken in by either fake news or other things that would, result in you just taking what somebody else says on face value and
Mm-hmm.
just sticking it in your mind and believing it for no reason, etc. Think for yourself. But then there's another sense of think for yourself in which you say that the product of my thinking, all the effort I put into my thinking, that I should be doing it for myself. And this is something that's in the subtext of a lot of what you write in the book, where you
Mm-hmm.
talk about that the goal is, in chapter 10 too, to just get on with your life, to live your own life, live the life that you want, love the people you want, etc. And so my question is, how does it sit with you for you to say, okay, Dave Rubin, I'm going to think for myself in the sense of kind of a rational self-interest? How
Yeah.
does that sit with you?
Oh, well, I love rational self-interest. I
Okay.
fully believe it. I don't think that selfishness is evil. I've got a book right there. It's called Equal is Unfair by a couple of
Mhm.
guys that you know, right?
Yes,
You're
yes.
on. And people think this selfish meme, it's like the socialists who demand things from other people all day long are somehow not thought of as selfish. Thomas Sowell has a great line that I'll butcher completely, but it's something like the greatest trick they ever accomplished was that they figured out that they could make greed look like a virtue, and it's not a virtue. So when I say be selfish or rational self-interest, when people think selfish means, oh, you're only going to do for yourself at the expense of everyone else, I simply don't believe that. When I say I live for myself, well, you know what that means? I pay my guys really well, and I pay all of their
Mm-hmm.
health insurance. Now, why am I doing it? Am I doing it because I'm some benevolent God? No, I'm doing it because I know if I pay my guys well, in the middle of coronavirus, we sent them all a box of Omaha steaks. It was like, why did
Wow,
I do it?
nice.
Why did I do it? Well, it was because everyone doesn't really want to go out. Everyone wants a nice steak. And it's like, my guys are working hard for me. So, I mean, and which, by the way, they're really doing for themselves, right? They're doing it so that my director has 2 kids and he wants to live the best life he can, and I want him to feel rewarded. So the idea of selfishness, I think there's very, very, very few people out there who are selfish, meaning it is all about me. I'm going to destroy the earth around me.
Right.
Most people are selfish, meaning if I do what's genuinely good for me, that probably is good for my coworkers. It's probably good for my family and my community. And by the way, that's the most, I would say, small government libertarian principle you could have, because that's bottom up. That's let me figure something out for myself and see if we can seed the ground with that. And then let this thing rise. That to me is a beautiful thing. You know, one other thing on rational self-interest, you might know this story, but the first time that I interviewed Yaron Brook, I was still at Aura TV. So we were with another network. And the network was going through a lot of changes at the moment. And they were asking much more of me and much less of the failing shows because my show was succeeding. So they suddenly wanted me to then work harder and produce these crazy metrics to kind of drag everybody behind me.
Wow.
And I sat down with Yaron for the first time, and he talked about rational self-interest and the virtue of selfishness and all of these things. And I had, you know, obviously I had read The Fountainhead and I had known a lot of these ideas sort of on the edges. But I kid you not, and I think this actually got cut from the book because there was one chapter where I did more of my history that didn't make it. But I actually made the decision to leave Aura TV that day after talking to Yaron.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because it was obvious that the things that I was struggling with in my own professional life, well, this is exactly what this guy's talking about. And I shouldn't be being crushed because I'm succeeding. Why am I helping those things? If anything, I'm independent now, but if, let's say, I doubt I'm ever going to go to another network in a traditional sense, but if I ever did, I wouldn't want to be the biggest thing at the network. I would want to be a piece of it so we can then grow together. I wouldn't want to be the thing that's dragging everybody else, because that means they're most likely dragging you this way. So I am completely fine with rational, that's the key word, rational self-interest. Otherwise, when you just tell people self-interest, they think that means, oh, you're going to pollute the lakes and, you know, burn down the building.
Well, I mean, you sort of are the head of your own network these days, but it's a smaller network, and I couldn't see that you're probably dragging everybody. It sounds like everybody's eager to be there and work for you. And so,
yeah,
you know,
I meant that more on when I say network. I mean, like right now, I run the Rubin Report. That's our production company, and I mean, my employees are with me on this journey. What I meant more was if it was a traditional network and there were 5 shows that weren't pulling their weight, and then and then my resources were just constantly going to them so I could feel good about myself or something.
Yeah, I guess the only reason that sort of thing exists is because so many people are steeped in the more altruist morality that if you are so good and so talented that it's just right that you should carry more of the burden. And of course that's lefty speak for you right there, huh? So no, there were a couple places in the book where I wasn't exactly sure, because you talked about, for instance, selfishly checking your messages when you were out at a restaurant with friends or something, that would be a bad thing to do. And it's actually not selfish to do that, right? Because you're at that restaurant with the friends and you want to have the exchange with them, and you don't want to be, you know, glued to your...
So. Yeah, that you know, whether that's selfishness or just the more that sort of everything's about you at all times, or really what I meant by that is that I want people, well, not even I want people. For me, I know if I'm out with friends, I want to be as present as possible.
Yes.
I like the fact when people just put their phones aside or just, you know, you know what it's like. You're out to dinner with friends. Suddenly one person goes to the phone. Next thing you know, everyone's at the phone. And it's like, if you can control that and be present, we're running out of those spaces, and we should cherish them.
Yeah, let's hope we all get to that again quite soon. Yeah, and then the other thing you talked about was, you know, being able to help other people by helping yourself first. And it is really true in a trivial sense. You know, I wanted to talk with Ben Shapiro about this, because he had something a while ago where he was talking about how capitalism is forced altruism, right? And when you are in a capitalist society, or if you're behaving selfishly, how is it that you are going to be able to put food on your table or do anything else? It's by providing value to other people. Now, if you're doing it properly, you're going to do it in a way that you also enjoy and that you find fulfilling for yourself. And so, you know, again, when I talked with John Allison just a little while ago, he's always, when he's making mission statements, either for an organization or himself or anything else, it's, you're going to make the world a better place by doing whatever it is. You know, what is it that you're going to do? And it's kind of trivially true. You're going to have to provide value for other people if you're going to gain benefit yourself. That's what the trade is all about. But is it okay for you to do for the purpose of benefiting yourself primarily? Do you have permission to do that? And it sounds like you're fine with that.
I'm absolutely fine with that.
Okay.
I mean, you know, think about how actually deeply selfish in the wrong sense of selfishness it is when the left says we're going to guarantee everyone a government job. Nobody wants a government job, a job that you basically can't get fired, so don't have to produce, a job where you have to work in an office building with fluorescent lighting. I mean, is anyone thrilled that they work at the post office? That's not to say postal workers aren't wonderful people.
Right.
My guy happens to be really nice, you know, but
Right.
but this idea, we're going to guarantee you a job. Well, that means you're guaranteed something that you'll never own, really. What do people what did all the people who are the most inspiring people in the world do? They do something cool. Why do we all love Elon Musk, right? Like, why did my friends that are doing cool things like owning restaurants or having shows or whatever, why is that all the fun stuff? But then you meet the guy, I work for the government and I stamp widgets all day and I push them across the desk. That is so deeply, when I say selfish in that regard, it's selfish meaning what they want to do is control you. They want to own your life. And I don't think anyone should own anyone else's life.
No, and that's not selfish at all, because, you know, Newsom is depending on all of us just staying here and taking whatever he's dishing out. And we're saying, no, dude, we're out of here.
Yeah.
We're not going to. And that's where being dependent on somebody else in that way, even if you think you've controlled them, you're still dependent on them. And that's not a good place to be. So because we have just a few minutes left and I want to be very respectful of your time, sir, let's go into a question that also I want to find out about this locals thing that you've created, but it's on the topic of social media. You have sometimes used the language of deplatforming, and sometimes you talk about censorship, that these media platforms engage in censorship. And we don't have time to talk too much about this now, but I've been of the position that there really is such a thing as a platform that is not a publisher, and that insofar as it is not editing your posts and really it's just sort of an up or down, you're either going to be allowed to publish versus not, that there really still is a platform. And, you know, writing Section 230 all day long can't make somebody into something that it isn't, that kind of objectively in the world we can distinguish platforms versus a newspaper, for example. But, you know, nonetheless, what you're doing, even if you and I disagree, what you're doing I think is so healthy, which is, if you don't like the platforms, create something of your own that's an alternative and compete. And so what are you doing with locals?
Yeah, so we started Locals about a year ago, and the reason was I realized that, you know, everyone that's online, every single one of us right now, putting this on YouTube, we are not home. We are renting an apartment from a landlord who could rip up the lease at any given moment, and you would have no ability to stop him from doing it, and he could kick you out on your butt and take all your data, and you could never communicate with your fans or friends again and the rest of it. So what I realized was, look, I'm not trying to replace YouTube or Twitter or Facebook yet, but what I am trying to do is secure people's digital lives. We are building digital homes. So what we have built with Locals, and RubinReport.com is the first project of Locals, but we've brought on people like Bridget Fedezi and Michael Malice, and we just brought on Scott Adams, and we have some big names coming, and I'd be more than happy to introduce you to the Locals guys. But what we're doing, by the way, anyone can sign up at Locals, and we now have a fairly simple 5-minute process to start setting up your own community. But what it is that you will own your video, you will own your audio. It's your community with an unmanipulated algorithmic news feed. There's a paywall, because I really believe that the next version of the internet is you're gonna have to throw a couple bucks in to get in. That we all thought this was free, but we paid with our souls. We've let trolls and bots take over everything. You set your own rules in your community. So my rules around speech, as long as you're not breaking the laws of the United States, are pretty liberal. You can say what you want, but if you come there to just hate on everybody and hate me, I'll boot you out. But that's not deplatforming or an infringement on your free speech, because you can still be in anyone else's Locals. The same way I am all for free speech outside of my house, but I don't invite everyone in my house to tell me I'm an asshole. So I think what I've been saying to people is we've solved 95% of the problems for 95% of the people. I can't solve Alex Jones's problems. I'm not sure that's the business I want to be in anyway. That's not a condemnation of Alex Jones, and everything being equal, I'd rather him be on all the platforms still. There's plenty of odious people on all these platforms, and you know they made sort of a digital assassination right there that we all sat by and watched. And from what I understand, he's actually making more money than ever, because then they just pushed all his people to his own website. So that's a bit of a separate thing. But I believe in competition, and if you want to make sure that your community is not just taken out whenever they decide to take you out. Candace Owens is banned from Twitter right now.
Right.
You know, we're building iOS apps and Android apps so you can get push notifications to your audience. They can communicate with each other. We just submitted it today, but we'll have live chat within the app for the next update, which should probably take about 4 days. We're working on live video streaming. It's decentralized in that all of these communities are separate and you choose who you want to communicate with. So I think it's basically the most mature, honest way we could look at Internet 3.0. We're working on all sorts of stuff related to crypto and blockchain and tokenizing and all of that kind of stuff. And it's consistent with the stuff that I preach. So that's why I think it's a worthy project.
Is there a paywall for all of the content, or is there sort of some publicly available teaser content that people can browse and stuff
well,
too?
well, first off, you as the creator can do whatever you want.
Okay.
So you can set financial tiers if you want. You could have no tiers, but everyone has to charge something, because literally by charging $1 a month, I would recommend you charge more, but by charging $1 a month, you will eliminate 90% of the trolls right there.
Sure,
they don't want their credit cards associated with anything. That will clean up most of the mess. If you want 10 tiers then of prices and people are going to see different things behind different paywalls, you can have it. For mine, the way we did it was you can pay whatever you want. And by the way, I have some people that give me $500 a month and some people that give me $5 a month.
Right.
The only tier thing that we have is that for 25 or more, you can message me directly.
Okay.
But literally anyone can you can set it up however you want. The whole idea is we're just building you the home. Now you decorate the house however you want.
I like it. It sounds like a blend of Mighty Networks and Patreon or something.
Yeah, I didn't even know what Mighty Networks was when we came up with this whole thing. And then I went to a lot of boardrooms in Silicon Valley, and a lot of people said, oh, this is kind of like Mighty Networks. We talked to the people who did Mighty Networks. But I think we've got a really nice, our architecture is beautiful. One of our initial investors actually is one of the real architects of the beginning of the internet. So we have a really scalable code that's elegant and really nice. And just to be totally clear, even though I know you wouldn't care, I take $0 from the company. I've put in a lot of time, obviously, and sweat. Of course, I own part of the company, and one day maybe I'll profit off it, but I'm not doing this for profit right now. Yeah, I hope I do too, but I don't take a dime. I'm doing it because I believe in it, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, well, that sounds beautiful, Dave. Thank you so much. And I apologize for YouTube glitch, but I don't know. This is not the first, not the last, I'm sure. I've seen them on your channel sometimes, but probably less than mine. Anyway, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Amy. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Good luck with the rest of your tour, and congratulations again.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.